You keep thinking money is just money and politics is just politics. But when you watch what the Trump family is doing with crypto, you realize something uglier. The system is not built to protect you. It is built to route wealth to whoever understands how to bend it. And the moment you understand the pattern, you will see it everywhere in markets, in elections, in your own relationships. Because it is the same mechanism wearing different masks. Welcome to the hidden self. Today we're going to talk about the uncomfortable truth nobody wants to say out loud. The biggest gains in crypto have rarely gone to the believers. They've gone to the operators. The people who don't really care about the technology at all, they care about leverage. You will hear about reversals that look impossible, about statements that flip from contempt to devotion on a timeline that just happens to coincide with power. You will hear how a regulatory squeeze can be turned into a campaign promise, and how campaign promises can become a private revenue stream. And then we'll pull it back to you, because the real hidden self topic isn't Donald Trump. It's the part of you that still thinks you're an investor when you're actually the product. Stick with me, because by the end you'll understand why people get rich in these cycles, and why most people only get crushed. Not because they're stupid, because they're psychologically predictable. Let's start with the reversal. In 2019, you had Donald Trump saying he wasn't a fan of Bitcoin. He framed it like an air pocket. He made it sound weightless. Not real money. Easy to lose. A joke with a punchline. Then in 2021, he sharpened the knife. He called Bitcoin a scam, a fraud, something that would collapse in the waiting room of catastrophe. The language wasn't neutral. It was contempt dressed up as certainty. Now, fast forward to July 2024. On a stage connected to Bitcoin culture, he says he will make the United States a superpower in Bitcoin. Not a mild endorsement, a mission statement, a flag planted in your face. If you're the kind of person who believes markets reward value, you will try to find the rational explanation. You'll ask what changed. You'll assume he learned something, or that the data forced him to admit he was wrong. But the hidden self-truth is simpler and harsher. People like him don't switch views because of facts. They switch views because of incentives. They switch views when the crowd changes, when the risk changes, when the doors open, when the rules can be rewritten. Think about how this works psychologically, because this is where most viewers miss the real lesson. When someone publicly rejects an asset, most audiences store that rejection as identity. They think the person is now a critic, now a skeptic, now an enemy. So when that same person later embraces the asset, you experience cognitive whiplash. Your brain tries to reconcile the contradiction by forcing a story of growth or enlightenment. But power does not need coherence. Power needs outcomes. Here's a micro story. Imagine you're watching from your apartment. You bought crypto based on a promise. You watched it dip. You started hating yourself. Then you see a video of a famous figure who once mocked crypto now suddenly praises it. You feel a jolt of relief. Your inner narrative flips from shame to hope. You don't ask what the incentive is for him. You assume the asset must be safe because the celebrity is safe. That's exactly how belief gets harvested. A reversal designed for optics becomes a trigger for your own need to feel okay. Now take a step closer. The reversal wasn't just a statement. It was followed by events that look like coincidence until you study the incentives carefully. You saw crypto markets react to political messaging. You saw attention spikes tied to posts and announcements. You saw the kind of wealth extraction that only works when the audience behaves like a herd. And then there is the detail that makes the whole thing smell like a system, not a trend. The story of the Trump family isn't just crypto became popular, it's crypto became a funnel. It is the funnel that matters. Because once you understand the funnel, you stop asking whether someone is a believer, and you start asking whether they are a beneficiary. Let's talk about the part everyone ignores, the regulatory squeeze. When Joe Biden came in, the government tightened the grip on digital assets. People say it like it's just policy, like it's a debate. But for crypto businesses, it felt like a hunt. Complaints became lawsuits. Lawsuits became settlements. Settlements became exits. And the enforcement narrative was consistent. Treat certain crypto activities as securities. Punish unregistered offerings. Punish misleading claims. Punish market manipulation. You can dismiss this as the government doing its job, but the real psychological effect was different. It created fear and urgency inside the industry. And fear does something useful to operators. Fear makes people bargain. When a sector is under pressure, it starts looking for a rescue plan. Not a rescue because of morality. A rescue because survival requires access. You don't need to be a genius to understand that businesses under enforcement will search for a political ally who can reduce the risk. And then comes the election cycle, where every fear turns into a funding opportunity. In the United States, there are millions of crypto holders. That's not just investors. That's a voting bloc, a media bloc, a lobbying bloc, and among them are people who do not just trade coins. They show up, they influence, they organize. So if you are a politician who understands anger, who understands grievance as fuel, you don't need to believe in crypto. You just need to recognize that crypto holders have the kind of rage that turns into money and votes. This is the hidden self mechanism. People who feel threatened by institutions often think that attacking the institution is morally empowering, but sometimes it's just bargaining under panic. You think you're fighting the system, you might actually be feeding it with your own resources. The operator doesn't attack the institution to destroy it. The operator attacks it to replace it, then uses the replacement as a personal tool. Now here's where it becomes sharper. Trump makes a promise that targets the regulator directly. Gary Gensler becomes the symbolic enemy. The promise is not, we will regulate better. The promise is, we will fire him. That one line does something huge. It converts the entire industry from hunted prey into potential partners. It tells every threatened founder, every struggling exchange, every platform terrified of courtrooms, your misery has an end date if the right person wins. And what comes after misery ends? Donations, connections, quiet deals, campaign support that looks like civic engagement but functions like investment. You want the dark truth? In politics, support often works like a purchase order. You don't always buy a product directly. Sometimes you buy a future outcome. Delayed enforcement, special permission, legal interpretations that favor your business model, and regulators who suddenly develop amnesia. Now add another layer. Crypto culture loves performance. It loves narratives. It loves public symbols. It loves the feeling that you are early. So once Trump decides he can convert this culture into power, he doesn't just announce, he builds a brand pathway into digital assets. The first experiments look like marketing, NFTs, memecoins. The logic is not, we need new technology. The logic is, we need attention, and attention becomes money. Imagine what it feels like for a powerful businessman to watch thousands of strangers pay for his image using an asset that is supposed to be just hype. If you have built an identity on selling physical status for decades, the moment you see digital status printing cash, you don't ask why the crowd is irrational. You ask how to scale it. That's the psychological switch, from curiosity about the tool to obsession with the machine. And when you scale, you don't just sell, you engineer the conditions for profit. Memecoins are perfect for this because they exploit group emotion. They rely on social contagion. One person posts, another person buys, another person feels late, another person buys to avoid humiliation. Prices rise, then they correct, and the correction is framed as volatility, which is true, but also convenient. The winners lock gains while the losers tell themselves it was a learning experience. Now connect this to something crucial, regulators. Under one administration, these assets would likely be investigated. Under another, the scope of enforcement can narrow. A class of tokens that would be prosecuted can suddenly be treated as acceptable, or at least less risky. So what's the difference? Not the code, not the technology. It's the political will and the regulatory interpretation. And once you see that, your faith in innovation starts to look naive. Now we reach the part that makes you feel uncomfortable because it hits power where it lives. Access. At some point, there is an announcement, a private dinner, a list of holders, VIP meetings, a curated circle. This is where meme coins stop being a fun experiment and become a ticketing system. It's a social ladder made out of speculation. It's a way to convert wealth into proximity. Because in any elite ecosystem, proximity is value. Being near the center creates opportunities that never show up in public. It creates influence that cannot be captured in charts. It creates deals whispered in rooms you will never enter. And the audience buys in anyway, because your brain hates being excluded more than it hates being used. Many people will say, but the government dinner is not corruption if rules are followed. That sentence is a trap. It's how institutions protect themselves from moral language. It's also how people protect themselves from admitting what's obvious. If foreign money flows in through legal channels that still achieve the same effect as buying access, then you don't have clean governance. You have governance optimized for loopholes. The hidden self-truth is that legality is not morality. Legality is paperwork. Morality is the intention and the impact. Now the mechanism becomes clearer. World Liberty Financial. This is where the funnel turns into an empire narrative. It's not just a token. It's framed like a financial institution. It's pitched as a future bank. It's pitched as innovation. But the question is not whether it can function. The question is who benefits and who controls. When a family's interests are structurally aligned with a financial project, it doesn't require cartoon villains. It requires only predictable incentives. If the system allows the family to capture revenue while shaping policy and enforcement, the family will do what any rational profit seeker would do. They will push the machine. And you can see how it works without needing to prove every detail like a courtroom story. You watch patterns, you watch timing, you watch how policy announcements coincide with asset interest, you watch how enforcement changes align with political victories, you watch how the market responds to political messaging. That is enough to know the asset is not the story, the asset is the vehicle. Then comes the international piece. Foreign investors cannot openly fund political campaigns in a direct way. But when you create a private token ecosystem that sells membership and support, the money can still travel. It arrives as investment in a business rather than a donation. Same money, different label. And because it is labeled differently, the public can pretend it isn't the same thing. That's the self-deception that keeps the machine running. Now let me make this personal. Most viewers are not thinking like this. Most viewers are thinking, I just want to grow my money. I want freedom. I want to beat the system. They think crypto is liberation, but the hidden self sees the real psychology. When you chase returns, you outsource your judgment. You hand the steering wheel to whatever narrative gives you permission to feel smart. You accept risk because it comes with identity. I'm early. I'm a believer. I understand what others don't. That identity becomes a drug. And once your identity is attached to the coin, you can't admit you might be used. So you keep buying. You defend the hype. You explain away the dump. You convert a loss into proof that you were right all along, but the timing was wrong. Meanwhile, people closer to power do not need to be believers. They can dump whenever they want. They can hedge. They can coordinate. They can influence. And they know something you don't want to hear. Belief is not a requirement for profit. Belief is a requirement for the crowd. The next layer is the stablecoin push. Stablecoins are marketed as practical. They claim to reduce volatility, to enable payments, to make digital assets usable. A stablecoin at $1 value is supposed to be boring, and boring sounds trustworthy. But boring is also a feature for control. If you can issue a stablecoin that becomes widely used, you can integrate it into transactions, contracts, and networks. You can earn fees. You can build rails. You can shape where money moves. Now connect that to timing. After political shifts, after enforcement changes, you see new stablecoin announcements. You see partnerships. You see large exchanges using these assets. Coin becomes infrastructure. Infrastructure becomes leverage. And leverage becomes wealth that isn't just dependent on market hype, it's dependent on adoption and permissions. That is the empire logic. Now we go deeper. The front-running behavior. The claim described here is that a family project had accumulated large positions, then used political announcements about national crypto reserves to front-run market moves. Front-running is illegal in traditional finance because it's unfair to the people who trade without insider timing. In crypto, where enforcement is inconsistent, and narratives move faster than oversight, front-running can slip through the cracks, or it can be masked by vague statements and public information. But the pattern is what matters again. Power sends a signal, market moves, holders near the center benefit. This isn't unique to one family. This is the universal structure of elite advantage. The closer you are to control, the more you treat information as a weapon. Now here's the psychological trap for you as the audience. You will look for villains and miss the system. You will watch and think, well, they're criminals. Or they're just lucky. Or they're just smarter. But if you believe that, you stay powerless. Because the system doesn't require the operator to be evil in a cinematic way. It requires the operator to be strategic and the public to be gullible in predictable ways. The crowd is predictable because emotion is predictable. Shame is predictable. FOMO is predictable. Hope is predictable. Identity is predictable. So the operator designs a path where you feel those emotions and then hands your money to the machine. Now let's zoom